So everyone, welcome. We have a lot of great viewers today for episode 3 of a chef's journey through Alexander Valley. We are so excited to have Tina Caputo, who is our guest moderator today, and she will be leading you through this wonderful adventure. As always, we encourage you to go to the Q&A, ask us questions. We have a great group of panelists that are happy to answer them as we go. We'll also be sharing the recipe from the wonderful and talented Liza Hinman of Spencer Sisters at the end of the episode. So I'm going to now introduce Tina and then let her take it away. Tina is a Northern California-based freelance writer and editor who covers wine, beer, food, and travel. Formerly the editor-in-chief of Vineyard and Winery Management, Tina now writes for Visit California, Eating Well, Vine Pair, Sonoma, Spirited, and many more publications. She also runs a content and marketing writing service business, Caputo Content Creation. Without further ado, I'll let her take it away.
Thank you, Lisa Marie, and hello and welcome everybody. I am super excited about today's webinar because it focuses on one of my absolute favorite grape varieties, Sauvignon Blanc. So here's a little fun fact about Alexander Valley. There are about 12,000 acres of vines planted in the region, but only about 200 acres of those are Sauvignon Blanc. Cabernet is definitely king in this region, but it can also grow some really beautiful Sauvignon Blanc. But before we get to our panelists' thoughts on that, I'd just like to take a minute to introduce everyone. So first we have Liza Hinman, who is our chef. She is the chef and owner at Spencer Sisters, which is a fabulous farm-to-table restaurant in Santa Rosa that she opened in 2012. Earlier in her career, she worked in some incredible restaurant kitchens in San Francisco, including Woodward's Garden, Bisou, and Delfina. And she was the executive chef at Santee in Geyserville. She also happens to live in the Alexander Valley. Next, we have Jim Ricard, who is the owner of J. Ricard's Winery in Cloverdale. Jim has been growing grapes in Alexander Valley since 1976. He started out as a grape grower while working full-time as an ICU nurse. He used to sell all of his fruit to other wineries, but then in 2005, he started his own winery, and now he uses half of his grapes for his own small lot handcrafted wine. Our second winemaker in the lineup today is Brad Beard, the owner and winemaker at Mercury Wine in Geyserville. Brad learned the wine trade while working in restaurants in his home state of Arizona, and he's also worked in wine sales and distribution. When he felt like it was time to get his hands dirty, he moved to California to learn how to make wine. He founded Mercury in 2009 to make interesting blends with locally sourced Bordeaux, Rioja, and Rhone varieties. And finally, we have our grape grower, Dan Rotlisberger of Croft Vineyards. Dan grew up on his family's Rotlisberger Ranch vineyard and learned farming at a very early age. Now he's the third generation of his family to farm the 20-acre Croft vineyard in the Alexander Valley, which is next door to his family ranch. And it's also the source of the grapes for Jim's wine that we're going to be tasting shortly. So now that our intros are all out of the way, let's start with Liza. And by the way, for those of you watching at home, if you'd like to start tasting your wines, feel free to go ahead and do that. So Liza, you created 2 incredible dishes to go with today's wines. Can you tell us about those?
Absolutely. I have a couple, well, I had a couple different thoughts for both dishes, but as I sat with the wines, spent a little time with them, I kept mulling over, you know, what's in my garden right now, what is just absolutely at its peak, and what will mirror and kind of emphasize some of the lovely characteristics of these 2 wines. And it was fun to work with both because, you know, it's just a perfect representation of how we have the same varietal, not too far, farmed not too far apart from each other, and they can really read so differently in the bottle. So for the first wine to pair with the Mercury, I decided to play off of the kind of beautiful melon flavors and the citrus notes and do something that was sort of fresh and light. And I worked on a dish that we like to do at the restaurant oftentimes as a base for things like roasted pork belly or roast grilled chicken. But today, just to do it as a beautiful salad on its own, it has heirloom watermelon in it. Some I used a variety of cucumber called a painted serpent cucumber, which is kind of crunchy and very melony in its own way, and some beautiful sheep's milk feta, and then some pistachios to give a little toasted and a little bit of a little bit of added sort of richness to the dish. And then I also, in the vinaigrette, I put some little bit of fresh ginger, because there is like this very light hints of spice to it, and I thought it could stand up nicely to the wine, as well as a good amount of citrus zest and juice to give it nice brightness, and a little bit of fennel seed as well, just to give it a back note of some earthiness that would balance all those bright flavors out. So this was, a really fun wine to pair with. I felt like it had lots of potential, flavor reflection. So
that sounds beautiful.
How do you gentlemen feel as you're
so you guys are you're tasting along right now.
We are.
What are your thoughts?
For this wine, I've never had Sauvignon Blanc paired up quite so amazingly. A lot of times people will go with Thai food, a little something spicy.
Sure.
Actually, what's amazing about this, between the feta, the toasted pistachios, and actually the cucumber is my favorite, because it does have more of a melony flavor to it, and it really accentuates the wine. I personally think this is one of the best pairings I've ever had with my Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, I would agree. Hey. I have to say, I just love that watermelon, feta, and roasted pistachios. I mean, they add such richness to the wine, and just really, really adds a lot to it.
Yeah, I think the brininess of the feta brings out a nice note, that like slight saltiness also helps bring out those like deeper flavors and notes, because it's, as you dig into this wine, it kind of evolves and gets more and more complex as you continue to sip on it. And while it is like, the fresh, crisp, refreshing notes start off, as you sit with it for a little while, you realize it needs more complexity to the dish to really play off all the notes that are there. So I'm glad you like it.
I thank you so much. It is the most, like I was saying, this is just an amazing pairing. I would have been stunned with any Sauvignon Blanc, but it really makes my Sauvignon Blanc sing. Thank you so much. You did such a great job.
Yeah, good. I'm so glad to hear that. So in contrast, when I tasted Jim's wine, it has a little bit more weight to it, a little bit, and just different notes. And again, I wanted to do a dish that kind of, I really did pull almost all the ingredients out of my garden today, and was just totally of this moment, but had, a little bit more heftiness to it. So I worked with our local king salmon, because what is better than that at this time of year? And I think people oftentimes tend to think more Chardonnay with salmon, but I feel like often the salmon has such richness to have a wine with some crisp, acidity to it, kind of helps balance that fat from the fish, and it can take a little bit more weight. And so this one, I did what I call the summer vegetable ragu, which really, this dish is so versatile because it could go in a lot of different directions. This just happens to be the vegetables that are like at their peak right now, which is sweet corn. The tomatoes kind of break down in the saute, so they add a little acidity, but they're very sweet because they're all sort of small heirloom varieties. A little earthiness from those green beans and the chard, and then the nice zucchini. And there's a little bit of borlotti beans in my version too that were just out of the can, and a splash of cream at the end to just add a little richness and kind of bring it all together, and some torn basil. And then there's that green sauce on the top is called a sauce verte. Sometimes it's salsa verde in Italian. And it's just like herbs and lemon zest and really good olive oil. It's light and refreshing. There's a little bit of anchovy also to give it some earthiness. And this was fun. And this kind of a dish, if this Sauvignon Blanc had been more, let's say, grassy, I might have gone almost more in like a Mexican flavor variety where I might have added some green chili and done it with the corn and zucchini, but maybe cilantro instead of basil. You know, so this dish is kind of it's kind of a good jumping off point as a concept, and it could work with if you had a different Sauvignon Blanc where the flavor profiles headed another direction. You could kind of change up the vegetables and still, you know, reflect on what the wine tasted like, which is fun.
Well, I was curious about in the sauce verte, there's some pretty, like there are some pungent flavors in that for sure, which has the anchovies, and there's some capers in there. So like in general, what kind of wine would you say work with those kinds of flavors?
Again, I think it needs, you know, it has a saltiness to it and an earthiness. And I thought with Jim's wine, it had both, you know, it has a backbone. It has some nice, a little bit of structure to it. It has a little bit of weightiness in the middle, so it could stand up to those earthy flavors, but it also has that crisp zippiness that you know, kind of finishes off nicely, and it can kind of balance out those more intense keeper and anchovy flavors.
So Jim, what do you think about this pairing?
I think it does. I mean, the take-home message about the Sauv Blanc is that it's a bigger, richer wine that is typically out there. And, you know, the answer is with it, it can go with a lot more bigger, richer things. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a great pairing because it does really match up really nicely with that long finish that this wine has. And that's really the answer with the wine. It has such a long, lingering finish. You need some kind of a food stuff that's going to match that lingering finish. And this salmon hits it out of the park. And the saltiness of the sauce is pretty amazing. It's not something you wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't expect, but it sure does do the job. It brings
and
that.
Having all those layers of herb too, which kind of like give it, you know, different sort of floral notes. And I think that also plays off because there are some, you know, light herbaceous notes in the wine as well that it kind of lifts that piece. So yeah, I thought this was it's a very classic. And again, you could adjust, if you're not the biggest tarragon fan, you could leave, you know, adjust that and add a little more basil and go more almost in the pesto direction. But I like that it brings together kind of multiple herbs and creates this sort of bouquet.
Yeah. I like the, you know, one would, when, you know, people add, you know, salt or seasoning to their foods, but it's kind of like this anchovies does the same thing and brings a lot more to the plate than mere salt does. It's pretty spectacular. And I really like the ragu. That's one of my favorite parts of the thing, is that I like eating. Now, we used to raise all our own food years ago. And, you know, here when my kids were little. And we ate out of the garden. You ate what you ate. You got what you got. And this is right on for me.
Great.
Yeah, so Liza, it seems, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say something, you know, because I think people had mentioned earlier, you know, typically with salmon, I would recommend, you know, maybe a Pinot Noir or, you know, a Chardonnay, you know, something that can handle the fattiness of the salmon. I'm going to tell you right now that this Sauvignon Blanc in this pairing is the best Sauvignon Blanc with salmon that I've ever had. It is perfect. One, because Jim's wine does have a little more weight than a typical Sauvignon Blanc, well-balanced acids, and it's those acids that are taming the fats in the salmon, in the bright herbaceousness of the of the top is absolutely fantastic. This is a beautiful pairing, and I would not have expected it to be this fantastic. This is great.
So in general, I was going to ask if there is such thing as a classic food pairing for Alexander Valley Sauvignon Blanc, but after tasting these two wines, they're so different from each other that I don't think you could generalize in that way. So Jim and Brad, how would you explain the vast differences between your wines? Is that something that's happening in the vineyard and the site, or is it something you guys are doing in the cellar?
No, it's all site. You got to remember, Alexander Valley is this long, narrow valley. And off to the sides, here and there, up and down the valley, are these just really amazing microclimates that are much more prominent than when you have a wider valley like Napa, that is just as, is 10 times wider than the Alexander Valley. You have more homogenation there. Here, you have these little pockets that are, if you get it right, you hit a home run. I mean, you really have.
I agree with that 100%. And the other thing that I like about Alexander Valley, it obviously is prone to the Bordeaux grape varietals. And obviously Cabernet is king. We talked about that earlier. But also in Bordeaux, they grow the Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. And so that's why I love Alexander Valley Sauvignon Blanc, because it's a little more reminiscent for me personally to a European or a French style Sauvignon Blanc. And my style is a little more European. And so I try to get my Sauvignon Blanc to present more like a Sancerre, which is in a different region from Bordeaux, of course. But I would say mine's probably borderline Bordeaux Sancerre. And that's why I love Alexander Valley Sauvignon Blanc, because it is it is not coastal, and it's not New Zealand in style. It has a very distinct style, and with only 200 acres, like you were mentioning earlier here in Alexander Valley, these are very special wines.
So Brad, let's talk about your wine some more in some more depth. Can you first just tell people a little bit about your winery?
Oh, absolutely. We would be a micro winery. We produce anywhere from 1,800 to 2,500 cases a year, depending on how crazy I feel. And we are located in the heart, I would say the mecca of, if you want to be in wine, if you want to taste wines with many different microclimates, Geyserville in the heart of the Alexander Valley is the place to go, because within 30 miles from here, you can have everything from Tempranillo, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. Of course, Alexander Valley is killing it with Merlot, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc. And so for me, as a person who grew up with a little more European palate, I love the diversity that we have here, especially in the northern part of the Alexander Valley. And our tasting rooms right in downtown Geyserville. If you can't find us, if you walk one way on our street, we call it 60 yards of awesome. So if you walk 2 yards this way or 2 yards this other way and you can't see us, just look up and you'll see Mercury Wine. We are here. It is just a great launching point, I think, for if you're going to be investigating Sonoma County wines in general. We're right in the middle of it. And so if you stay here, and taste some wines, great restaurants, the whole one.
Okay. So where did the grapes come from for this Sauvignon Blanc?
So this is Alexander Valley as well, and I am a winemaker versus a grape grower. Jim's both, and then we have Dan as well. And so for me, I purchase about 98% of my grapes. And the majority of that comes from here in the Alexander Valley. But since I am in this great location, we've got Dry Creek and Russian River as well. So I can poach a little bit from there. But the majority of my grapes come from the Alexander Valley. And we try to produce I don't want to call it an old world style, but more of a European style, to where we're focusing more on subtleties and nuances versus what we can grow here, which is the most powerful grapes on in all of the growing regions in the world.
How do you make this wine? Like, what are some of the techniques that you use? I'm particularly interested in your approach to oak, and also how you retain such great, beautiful acidity in the wine.
Awesome. Well, there isn't any oak in general in this wine. It may sit for a month or so in neutral, but this is a stainless steel fermented wine. And if we run out of stainless steel space, it'll go into oak barrels, but those will be very neutral oak barrels. So they're not producing, they're not giving us any major characteristics. And with that, we're looking at a fresher wine, but we're also looking at harvesting this at a little bit less bricks of sugar. We can get to 26, 27 bricks of sugar, a little bit higher alcohol, and a more intensely fruity wine, a more New Zealand style. Because once you get higher bricks of sugar, you start bringing in those grassy notes and more grapefruit versus a Sauvignon Blanc that's more of a general citrus flavor. So you could pick out a little lemon, you could pick out a little lime, maybe a little grapefruit in my wine. And this would be more of a Sancerre or Bordeaux style, where the fruit's not big grapefruit and grass. We're looking for citrus flavor notes, and then some melons, and then just like Liza was saying with the spiciness, there's a little bit of spiciness, and because the grapes aren't quite as ripe, that allows the skins to give you a little spicy note to this wine and give it a little more complexity.
Definitely. I'm definitely getting that nice sort of Sancerre lime quality from this.
Thank you.
It's really nice. What do you other panelists think about this wine? What are some of the aromas and flavors you're getting as you taste it?
I like, again, I like that bright fruit, that acidity. In wine, for me, it's a lot about, especially, the whites. I like acid. I like that juicy quality. That's just, it's there. It's there in this wine.
For sure. Liza, so other than the fabulous watermelon salad that you created, what other types of food do you think would pair well with this?
I think, I tossed around possibly doing something that incorporated stone fruit as well, because I thought something like a peach or even a fluot would be an interesting kind of combination. And I know that Thai was mentioned as a typical pairing with Sauvignon Blanc, and those spicy notes, those are flavors that I love to work with as well. So, it might have been something that incorporated, like a chilled noodle salad that had some spice and heat, as well as herbs. And, as with wine in the food, for me, I'm always looking for the balance and hoping that there's going to be both the depth of herbaceousness as well as a good sense of acid and some richness as well as brightness. So, it's always what dish is going to kind of have those sort of flavors.
So Brad, what are some of your favorite dishes to have with this wine at home?
Oh my gosh, my favorite dish with this wine at home is, especially right now where we're going to be going into the 100-degree temperatures, my favorite dish is sitting on the back patio with my fan blowing on me, just enjoying this wine as what my brother would call a pork pounder. That's my favorite dish with this wine. It has good acid, but it's not super acidic. So this is a wine that you can actually enjoy on its own. If you've been a fan of Jim and I and watching our Facebook posts, we love to cook, and we love to make some fantastic pairings. And so I'm going to go ahead and say that my favorite pairing is probably my asparagus hamburger, which is where I take my asparagus.
Oh man, add
a bunch of good.
Wait, what is that?
Oh my gosh!
What are we talking about?
Here's the deal.
Amazing.
Yes, we love making wine out here, but we love to cook as well. And so Jim and I have this cooking duel going on where we are trying to outdo each other, making fantastic dishes. And I shocked him, I think about a month and a half ago, where we were doing barbecue, but I pulled out an asparagus burger out of
It
my
was
back pocket.
vegetarian barbecue, by the way. It was a vegetarian grill.
So you made the burger out of asparagus?
Yes, it is absolutely, especially since asparagus is coming out of our gardens right now. We were talking with Liza about all of the fantastic.
And you understand.
Our asparagus was growing crazy. And so we did an asparagus burger, some panko breadcrumbs. Yes, actually, I'm going to use the saltiness. Thank you. I'm going to use the Italian salt by putting some anchovies in next time. But we put a lot of panko breadcrumbs so it can stay together. And we put a little bit of Parmesan cheese so that when it grilled or when we seared it, it would hold together. And honestly, my Sauvignon Blanc and my Exina went just fantastic with it. But if my brother Grady was standing here in front of the mic, he'd be talking about Thai food. And so he was talking about some spicier, more intense things. This is not a wine that has any residual sugar. A lot of times with Thai food, you want something with sugar to balance the heat. But the beautiful sweetness of the citrus fruits very much coincide and balance with the Thai.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And just quickly before we move too far away from the food, we have a few questions for Liza I would love to ask
Sure.
about the recipes.
You got it.
So somebody is asking, for those of us who can't get painted serpent cucumber, what do you suggest?
Sure. I know. I was after I turned it in, I was like, maybe that was too specific.
Yeah, I
but
don't
it
think
was
I've
what I
ever
like.
seen that.
So painted serpent cucumber are these really cool ones you may see at the market. They kind of curl around like a snake and they have stripes on them. But really, any cucumber would work as something that's crisp. You just want to make sure if it has a lot of seeds, you want to take the seeds out. If they're younger, the seeds can stay in. Lemon cucumber might be nice in this as well. But yeah, sort of whatever they have at the farmer's market or you have in your garden or, in the produce section at the market, it doesn't matter that much. Just one, I like these again because they have more melon note and they're not as sort of green. They tend to be sweeter rather than bitter.
They're fantastic. So if you can get them, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Buy some seeds for next year.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we have another question. Somebody is just saying that you did such a wonderful job of distinguishing the two wines, both very wonderful wines, but very different. And you kind of had answered a little bit of this, Brad. This is a little bit more going back to the winemakers, but how would you attribute the differences between the two wines, terroir, production, temperature? If you guys can kind of answer that question, that would be great.
Jim, do you want to start out?
What? I can
Want to start out?
And that is that with the Croft is at, I think, 1,000 feet of elevation. It's not on the valley floor. It's an entirely different place, an entirely different world for growing Sauvignon Blanc. Most of that 400 acres or 800 acres, whatever it was, of Sauv Blanc is actually on the valley floor, which is cool and you get a lot of those really interesting flavors. But the big difference between Brad and mine is, he's on the bottomland and we're on the mountaintops at the end of the valley. And you get a lot of different characteristics. You got to remember, it's about grape growing, not, about the magic we do in the winery. It's the fruit has to talk to you, always.
Right. So it's about the site.
Yeah, site.
And I'll go ahead and just one more thing. We all noticed that Jim's wine was a little more rich, a little more complex. And that actually has to do with being up off the valley floor. Mine being on the valley floor, like he was saying, was a little cooler, and so that meant my wine was a little leaner. But that's what I wanted, because I wanted it to be more like a Sancerre and in that style of making wine. And that's what's really neat, that these wines weren't grown that far apart, but we can have wines that are very, very different in complexity and flavor, but both excellent.
Yeah, I mean, Dan is probably one more to address you know, the uniqueness of the site when we get to that part. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but before we go on to talk about Jim's wine in more detail, Brad, where can people buy your Sauvignon Blanc?
All right, so we are not a large winery, so we cannot ship to every state, but you can always get online and order wine, and we'll let you know if we can actually ship to your state or not. But because I'm such a small producer, probably 90 plus % of my wines are sold right here in downtown Geyserville out of my tasting room. So if you are thinking about heading out here, you can always call up and order it. We're doing okay with this one. We made 100 cases. I think we've got about 25 cases left, so we're not in danger this week or next. But with these temperatures, I guarantee you, everybody from San Francisco is going to be racing up here and grabbing it. So
for sure,
just give us a call,
and
we will try to accommodate you and make sure you can get the wine.
All right, fabulous. So let's move on to Jim's wine and get a little bit more into that. How did you? What was your process in making this?
The process, first of all, I have to explain a little something, and that is, number one, we have a winemaking team as we're at our winery. Wayne Brazil is our technical winemaker, and I'm the grape growing portion of that winemaking team. That's what I love to do. However, our direction is always toward wanting, you know, our fruit, the grapes, to speak to you. There's nothing about a lot of barrel influences, although sometimes there can be. And the Sauv Blanc, how it's made, is a little unique in the industry, I think. Basically, what we do is we begin fermentation in a stainless steel tank. It goes through fermentation, and at about 2/3 done, we transfer a portion, about 30%, into neutral barrels to finish. And they're in the barrels about 2-3 months prior to bottling. But
why do you do that with the barrels, Jim? What's the purpose of that?
The purpose of that is to add not barrel flavors, but to add the leasiness that we talk about with Chardonnay. And Chardonnay is aged in barrels and fermented in barrels because they want the yeast to be in there and age with the wine. Well, at 2/3 fermentation, you're going to have all the yeast you want in the wine itself. So basically, it's transferred to barrel and allowed to finish in there and generate that leasiness. Leasiness is a mouthfeel sense that adds really plush mouthfeel to that. And this really has it in this wine. It's one of the things that really extends out the palate and adds a lot to it. But I don't care for a lot of barrel flavors in our wines. You know, for me, I want you to say to me, gosh, that's good wine. What block did it come out of? You know, I don't want you to ask me, oh, that's good wine. What barrel did you use? You know, I want you to appreciate what I've done in the field as a grape grower.
Right.
That's
absolutely
what we need to do.
So the grapes for this particular wine came from the Croft vineyard. So maybe Dan, would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm actually out in the vineyard this afternoon. Yeah, hey, I'm actually out in the vineyard this afternoon.
Hey Dan, how's your grandpa doing?
Oh, he's good. I took over the farming of the Croft.
Uh-oh.
I think you're stalling on us, Dan.
Dan is in the Roma area. He's in the Croft vineyard, which is about 1,000 feet that way.
Can you guys hear me better now? I might try to walk around and see if I get a better signal.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, okay. I'm actually up in the vineyard, so excuse me if I break up. Jim, you might have to take over here, but I'm walking through the vineyard today, and I'm actually the third generation to farm the vineyard out of my family. My great-grandfather originally planted vineyards for the Croft, for the Helmholtz family who owns the Croft vineyards. And my grandfather took it over, and then I took over in about 2009 and have been farming them ever since. So,
Hey, Dan, I have a question for you.
yes.
And that is, why the heck did they plant Sauv Blanc up there? I mean, that's a perfect place for Cabernet.
Yeah, so Jim, there was an original planting of Sauvignon Blanc here that was planted in the 80s by my great-grandfather, Fred. And back in the 80s, you know, the wine industry was still relatively new to the county, so they didn't really know what to plant. So I think it might have been just luck and happenstance he planted Sauvignon Blanc. The vineyard performed well.
Oh, lost you again.
Back up.
We went to
Go back where you were.
This is, you know, this is the real deal, guys. I mean, this, you know, Dan's out there and he's talking 80s. Did we mean 1980? No, we talked about 1880. So
you guys hear me now? Is this good?
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Is this better?
Yeah.
So yeah, so the original planting on this particular site was Sauvignon Blanc. And when we went to replant it after the vineyard, you know, after a certain number of years, vineyards lose productivity for several different reasons. So we went to replant. We didn't see any reason to not replant the Sauvignon Blanc, even though, as Jim will say, this is really cab country. And really, this particular block is probably a very prime cab block, but it had done so well with Sauvignon Blanc over the years that we went back into Sauvignon Blanc and then eventually formed partnership with Jim, and here we are today.
Yeah, and the thing is, what's interesting about it is not a real, the fruit is not really sellable. As you know, you got to remember that, you know, wineries and grape growers are basically herd animals. Wherever the herd is going, they go. And right now, the herd is going towards New Zealand, and so basically, everyone's trying to emulate the New Zealand grassy, mineral, except for Brad, of course. But
Make me crazy.
I can see Brad getting angry over there.
The rest of the herd is. But the point is that you know, with the Croft, it has that big elevation, but it also gets very cold. I mean, the temperature's dropping 10, 15 degrees an hour there right now.
Wow.
And wouldn't you say, Dan, that the temperature is dropping now quite quickly?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Even, you know, and then I'll show you, Jim. You can still hear me. So here we're looking east down the rows. So there's Mount St. Helena, for those who are really familiar with Sonoma County, Alexander Valley. And if you look, and literally the valley floor of Alexander Valley drops down not 200 feet from the edge of the vineyard here. And then if you look this way, it's going to be kind of hard because the sun's coming up, but literally it drops down again on the other side, on the west side, into Healdsburg, and we actually have the Russian River on both sides of us. So we're kind of up in this saddle here, like Jim was saying, over 1,000 feet. And it's a very, very unique site, like you said, for Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, and I'm going to go ahead and say one more thing that you haven't mentioned. You know, valley floor, where, you know, the Sauvignon Blanc I get, that's Mendocino soil being brought down by the Russian River. What's actually incredibly special about that, besides being, you know, benchland or mountain fruit, is that that's giving you the absolute terroir of Alexander Valley.
Exactly.
That is.
It's the grapes talking at you. And
Yes.
you know, one of the interesting thing, Liza, that I by the way, I understand your restaurant has some nice outside seating now these days.
Yeah, we just opened a big outside patio, so we're able to actually have diners again, which is really nice.
Yay! Nice. I like that.
Yay is right.
Yay.
So Dan, you mentioned that the Russian River is on two sides of this vineyard. So what influence does that have on the fruit?
And we're actually in a unique spot right here. This little block of vineyard, it's about 3 acres, is actually in
Again, You got to go with this here.
different
This is remote.
appellations. So, is this better, guys?
Let me explain that. The thing is that what's about it is that the weather that comes into the Alexander Valley, the fog initially comes through this saddle where the Croft is. The Croft has probably the most amazing temperature shifts of anything. It could be 100 degrees during the day and drop to 40 degrees at night.
Wow.
As the fog moves through that vineyard. And what the benefit to that is that you get the ripeness of the heat, and yet you get the hang time of the cooling weather, lengthening out the process. And with the wine, all those really rich melony finished flavors that you're seeing, those really there's no grass in it. There's no the boxwood characteristic of Sauv Blanc. It's a much more richer, riper profile, and it's new to that. Yet it still has that acid backbone that really, really works a lot.
Can you remind me?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I just had a question. Can you remind me which end of the valley?
It's down your neighborhood, Eliza.
It is,
Liza. Yeah, the Croft is off Old Barn Road, which is West Soda Rock Lane.
You're right, got it. So yeah, it's the sort of the southern end of the valley.
But way
Yeah.
out there. It's where
Right.
the Russian River comes around, curves around into the valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, it's a spot that I when we were offered the fruit by Dan, it was like Dan said, it's a little tweaky place, but and I'm saying, okay, I'm a little guy, I can take tweak, I can take an oddball.
You're up for a challenge.
Well, you gotta do that, and that's my nature, really. And Dan and his grandpa are just amazing folks to work with.
So Dan, I don't know if you are within range here, but can you tell me how many acres your family farms total?
So between Croft and the Rotlisberger Ranch, which is a neighboring ranch, we farm about 30 acres total here in Alexander Valley.
Okay. So when did your family first plant grapes, and why did they pick Alexander Valley to do it?
Yeah, well, that was all just luck. My great-great-grandfather immigrated from Switzerland here to this area of Alexander Valley to actually be a dairyman for a family friend, the Rude family. And while he was working on the Rude Dairy here on West Soda Rock Lane in Alexander Valley, the Rotlisberger Ranch came available for purchase. So he actually saved up his money and bought it, and the ranch actually used to be much larger, but over the years, here we are today.
Okay, and I missed, did you say what year that you first planted grapes on that site?
First year we planted grapes was in the mid to late
80s.
Mid-80s?
Yep.
Okay,
Before that,
we're just going to fill in the blanks here.
Someone got that, I didn't.
All right, so I want to hear everybody's food pairing thoughts on Jim's wine. What do you guys think?
Well, I like to pair it with anything rich. I mean, it's such a big wine that, it has such a long finish to it that it needs something. I mean, Liza, rang the bell with salmon, because salmon's so rich and also has a long sense to it. I like shrimp, barbecued shrimp with it, and with a little bit of hot sauce. And I'm also inclined to have it with my wife Eliza makes it's wonderful wild mushroom and pasta dinner with it that just, again, it's got those things that it can pretty much match anything. It's a challenge, wouldn't you think, Liza, from your side, is that it's a challenge dealing with a wine like this. The fines,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on, and it could be one could overwhelm the other. The wine could kind of mute the food if it doesn't stand up to it enough.
Yeah.
Or you go for something that just like they wouldn't meet. So yeah, it's definitely, you have to think a bit about it, but yeah, as you're saying, something that has a little weight and is something you wouldn't naturally say, like, oh, Sauvignon Blanc, I'm going to go with something a little weightier, like.
No.
But this wine definitely, stands up to some rich flavors.
You like to cook, Brad. What would you pair with it?
Well, actually, I think her pairing is just fantastic.
Can't get better.
It is perfect for this wine. I love the fact that besides being a super fantastic chef, she has a wine palate as well.
Yeah.
Because you typically would not pair a Sauvignon Blanc with a salmon if you're really knowing what you're doing, because the salmon, with all of its intense flavors and it's more fatty, all those extra fats in the salmon are going to overwhelm typically a lighter white wine, but it doesn't overwhelm this. And the way that she paired the salmon, just spot on. I am so glad that you did this, because now I'm going to think about this for my Sauvignon Blanc as well. Typically, I would go into a Chardonnay because it needs a little more weight to handle a salmon, or I'd go into a light red. And for you to pair a Sauvignon Blanc with a salmon, I think is just spot on. It's beautiful.
Yay, yay.
Brilliant.
And Jim, you also had to make a pretty good Sauvignon Blanc to handle the salmon, because I don't think there's a lot of Sauvignon Blancs out there that can handle.
Exactly, that could stand up to it. That's for sure.
So Jim, you grow most of your own grapes yourself, but you chose to use Dan's grapes for this wine. Do you make wine from other vineyards as well, or just from this one?
Most of the thing is, I don't grow white grapes. We're a little bit north of Geyserville. And the Geyserville is a smack dab in the middle of Alexander Valley. And if you draw that line across, what the old timers cost was the bridge, which was the bridge across the Russian River. And south of that, it tends to be cooler. North of it tends to be hotter, which means that we're in red country now. My neighbors, Sagazio, there's a Sagazio home ranch right next door. Our old Zinfandel vineyard was planted by Rosa Brignoli in 1908. So we're kind of in the red department. So I tend to, buy the whites, Sauv Blanc from Dan. I buy Semillon from Herrick. I buy a little Viognier from the Dry Creek area, and a little Gewürztraminer from Russian River. So it just that the whites are what I'm out there for. The reds, on the other hand, I got to play with. I don't grow Barbera, but do I find a Barbera site that's extraordinary and maybe I'll make a little Barbera? Absolutely. If there is an old Carignan site, I would buying Carignan from a South Alexander Valley site that was planted in 1880. And we made that for a while. So, if I find something that we like to do that's challenging, I mean, we're grape growers, but we're also winemakers too, and it's fun.
Right.
We got to be out there. We got to be.
You guys
out
like to play around.
And yeah, I mean, why not make? If we find some Pinot Noir from an extraordinary vineyard like Chewy Ordaz, I mean, it's offered to us. Why not?
Why not? Yeah. So Jim, do you guys have a tasting room that people can come and visit at your winery?
Yes, we do. And we have you know, the wine today, we're offering a special today for everybody, and that is we're offering a wine club for a day. The wine club for a day means come on down, free tasting, 20% off, and or $10 shipping for three bottles or more. So, you know, I'd rather have you come on down because we have a great outside area to taste and picnic. And picnic we offer. You can order lunches from us, and we'll pick them up at Big John's. And Big John's is extraordinary.
Great market.
Yeah, oh yeah, and Nielsburg, and you come up, see us, and we'll do it. You can order at J. Ricard's, jrwinery.com is our website.
Right. You can also get all the wines from today's tastings on the alexandervalley.org website. You can go right on there and order it too. But Dan, can you hear me? I want to ask you one more question.
I can hear you if you can hear me.
Oh, beautiful. I can. Okay. So
all right.
I know that you like to use a lot of sustainable farming practices. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So just a few examples of some sustainable farming practices we use here in the Croft vineyard. You'll notice that if you can see this, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this row is tilled. We have a permanent cover crop in the next row. So that allows us to preserve a little bit of the topsoil and soil conservation. As just an example, this winter, after we harvest the fruit for Jim, we'll plant an actual bell bean, or what we call an organic soil builder, in these tilled rows so that the soil stays where it is when we get all the rains. And then also that helps us, the bell beans, especially their legumes, they fix nitrogen so that we'll actually be able to incorporate some nitrogen into the soil without using any synthetic fertilizers. That's just one example. Other examples include irrigation management. So there's several different steps we take before we pull the trigger on irrigation. Water is precious here for us in the Alexander Valley and really all of California at this point. So we actually will test the leaves, and we actually have a little machine that tests the amount to which the stomates on the leaves are actually opened or closed. It's called a porometer, and it measures the gas flow within the leaf. And as vines become stressed, those stomates close to conserve water, so they're not transpiring all the water into the air. And we're actually able to measure that. And that, along with soil moisture probes, and we're about to go through a heat wave, so I'll tell you, we're going to be irrigating based on the data we have. So, you know, it's just a matter of looking at the big picture more than just, you know, on a field by field basis.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm fifth generation. My daughters Ava and Ella, they're 8 and 6, and hopefully there'll be a 6th generation. So as far as sustainability goes,
person operating the Croft vineyard, eh?
Yeah. So as far as sustainability goes, I think we're doing something right, and it's something that's very important to us. So, you know,
that's fabulous.
We'll keep innovating moving forward.
Great. So I want to we only have a few minutes left, so I want to get to a few more of the questions we're getting from our participants. Someone earlier was asking Liza how the method of cooking influences the wines that you would pair with a dish. Like, for example, for the salmon, if you were grilling it versus poaching it or something of that nature. Oh, you're on mute, Liza.
Sorry, my kids are noisy in the background. I'm trying to leave that out for you guys. I thought about that today as I was making it because it is 96 now. It's a cool 96, but it was really warm. This dish, I could have done a poach with it and actually done it chilled with a style of Ragu underneath, and I think that would have actually been really nice as well. I wouldn't have grilled it, I don't think, because I think the char notes would have conflicted with the citrus a little bit and the acid balance. So I think that I just did a pan sear with it, or I would bake it in the oven. Another way I like to do sometimes with Sauvignon Blancs that have a little more, or wines that have a little more floralness to them, is I'll wrap the fish in fig leaves and then roast it, and it adds this like slightly tropical note to it that's really nice. So that's just like another interesting way to do it.
Okay.
So yeah, that's definitely a consideration when thinking about the pairing, for sure.
Right. So Brad, someone has a question for you. They wanted to know where the grapes came from again for your Sauvignon Blanc. I know it's Alexander Valley. Was there a particular site? Oh, I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Brad?
No, I can't.
Oh, there we go.
No.
Oh, no.
No, Brad, you're out.
We can't. It's not showing that you're muted, Brad, but we can't hear you. You're still talking. Brad, we can't hear you. When all else fails, just drink some Sauvignon Blanc. You know sign language. You can spell your answer in sign language.
Live by.
Okay. So while we're not hearing Brad talk, I just want to tell everybody that they can register for future episodes of Chef's Journey on alexandervalley.org. You can also purchase the wines there, and you can download the recipes from today's episode and from the other episodes. So everything you want is right there.
Yay.
And I want to thank all of you guys for this great conversation. This has been a lot of fun. And
Yay. Thank you, Tina.
yeah.
Yes, thank you for putting this together.
Oh, wait,
Absolutely.
before we go, I want to take a picture. Lisa Marie, can we do that?
That's right. So everyone who has a glass, and I know, Liza, you have to get going. Can we all raise a glass really quick?
Oh,
And we're going to
yes.
do a little screenshot. Thank you. And thank you for all of our viewers today. Again, register for future episodes at alexandervalley.org.
Look at Brad.
Yay.
Yay.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Oh, look at you,
Yay.
Dan. That's brilliant.
Thank you all. Have a
All right.
great day.
Cheers. Stay cool, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.